Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week, joining us from the amazing city of Atlanta in the US is Stella Ihenacho. Hey, Stella. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have the pleasure to have you here to talk about your experience. So Stella is a manager of continuous improvement and agility team at RedHat, and also an agile faculty lead at NSTAR Technologies. She is dedicated to transforming organizations and individuals through having an agile mindset. She believes that even if things may not be broken, there is always room for improvement. And that's really the attitude we have here on the podcast. Stella, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful question, honestly. For me, I've always worked in the project management space, been a project coordinator, been a project manager, been a program manager. And I remember my journey into becoming a Scrum Master was just really rooted in my passion and desire for managing projects, continuous improvement, and seeing how can we just get the work done. I'm the kind of person whereas if there's a task to be done, how can we get it done? And we don't have to always wait to get everything done all at once. Can we just get a part of it done, get that feedback, make mistakes, learn from our mistakes, and move forward? And so again, just starting my career again in the world of project management, and I'm thinking about how can we also deliver, valuable products and make sure that our customers are happy with what we're delivering. Now, I never really heard about the term like Scrum or Agile, but for some reason, now in retrospect, I realize that I've always been thinking as an Agile practitioner or practicing the principles and the value of Agile or even Scrum as well. And I remember a particular situation where I was working for a startup company, and in that startup environment, you have to do everything. You have to wear all they had. And because I was a project manager, I could do anything. I was doing testing. I was in HR. I was, doing customer feedback. I was testing at the customer. I was wearing all the hats. And then while I was again being a project manager professional and figuring out how can I grow in my career, how can I know more, and that's how I came into the whole world of Agile and then Scrum, as well. And ever since then, it's been forward and backward never. I've just literally loved it because the Scrum values, the Agile manifesto, the principles of Agile is literally who I am and how I operate. And I've never been so much in a profession like this where you realize that it's not just a way of working, it's also a way of life and also as a way of thinking. And so from project management, I evolved into becoming a Scrum Master, and I just grown my career in that way, wanting to know more, acquiring the knowledge, the technical part of it, but also putting myself in an environment where I can practice those things. We can do Agile not just by doing it, but by being it, right? And for me, I literally call myself, an Agile practitioner through and through, someone who sees agility in everyday activities, someone who can talk about Agile all day, every day. And so that has really been my journey through project management into Agile. And then, of course, starting as a Scrum Master and now being the manager of the continuous improvement and Agile team at RedHat.
So, of course, we're going to talk about Agile every day of this week with you, Stella. So we're going to test your resolution to talk about Agile every week. Right. So that's a wonderful story. I myself also come from a project management background. I still call myself a recovering project manager because I am aware that I sometimes fall into those habits and the tools that I learned back then, right? And I can imagine how that change, that transformation from project management to then through the startup doing everything, and then later on to apply the Agile values and mindset can be at sometimes quite difficult because it is a big change. So now we're going to dive into one of those difficult moments, Stella. So share a story with us of a difficult moment you had in that transition, growing up from being a project manager to then understanding and embracing agility in all its meaning and depth, right? So share that story with us. We'll dive into the takeaways and lessons learned later, but share that story with us first, Stella.
Absolutely. So I want to answer this question almost like in two ways, right? Definitely, it was a hard transition because, like I said, I've been a project manager, even a program manager. And when you're a project manager, the success or the failure of that project really falls down on you. While you might have engineers working with you, while you might have a customer, like you are the front-facing person who should know what's going on. You should know what the project plans are. You should know what the risks are. You should know what the schedule is and all of that. So there's a level of ownership that you have to take on. And honestly, again, that is a part of who I am when it comes to personality. And so being a project manager, again, comes naturally to me. And so, when you do wonderful project, customers happy, companies happy, and all of that. And, again, back to your point about the conflict is that when I began to realize, like, project management, the competencies are a bit different from what it means to be a Scrum Master, for example. It was a huge shift because at that point in time now is how do you give the power to the people who are supposed to be empowered to do the job? And then it comes to the level of trust. And then it comes to the level of stepping back. It comes to the level of wanting them to fail fast and fail forward. While as a project manager is we have to catch the failures before the failures actually happen. And then have a multiple mitigation plans and all of that. So I can vividly remember, working, with as a project manager and that project being successful. But again, in that same environment, in that same startup company, I think what I had going for me was there were a particular part of my work where being a project manager was needed, and a particular part of my work where being a Scrum Master was also needed. So I had that environment where I could move in and out of my competencies depending on what was on my plate. So, for example, putting together like one of our HR process plan within the company, it needed a project manager to do that because there was no point we couldn't do MVP. We needed to make sure that we had our HR plans, our HR applications all set up. But while we were actually building our own internal proprietary applications for our customer, then being a Scrum Master was a hat that I needed to wear, right? And so it afforded me the opportunity to be able to blend in and out of my competency. Now, taking a step back, I remember when I even left that organization and then stepped into another organization that was fully fledged, an agile operation. Then that was where I actually struggled, and I can never forget this scenario because that was my light bulb moment. I remember working for a financial company, one of the major financial services company in the States actually, and I had this multiple Scrum teams, and I was a Scrum Master, and I'd already built this wonderful relationship with my Scrum team, my developers, QA, all of them, the architects, and I remember towards the end of the sprint, we were coming up with we had like some stories that were still like in progress, and every day during the daily stand up, this wonderful developer will say he's working on it. He had no roadblock. And for the life of me, I couldn't really understand why he was still in progress and not moving down the swim lane on our Jira board. And so it's like 2 days, the day before the end of the sprint, I was like, hey, do you need any support from me? Because I hear you say that there's nothing blocking you and that you're still working on it, but I'm not really sure why it's still there. And it was like, I'm working on it. And then that was my cue to not ask him any question anymore and then trust the fact that he got it. Now, doing our retrospective, he actually raised this up as a concern. So we're talking about what worked well during our retrospective. What are the things that you did not like or you did not appreciate? And he raised up the fact that while he liked the fact that I was asking him about that work, he didn't appreciate the fact that it was giving him added pressure. And I was like, well, that was not my intention, but it taught me a lesson that was when my project management became a conflict on how I was operating within that environment, because I wanted to know when the work was going to get done instead of just trusting and believing that he was going to get it done because he said it. So again, that's where a competency can become a liability if not handled properly, right? So I'll say that was one example.
I really like that story because this is one of those stories where it isn't clear cut whether you should take the more directive
Yeah.
maybe teaching approach with this developer, or whether you should step back and let them fail. So I'm of two minds here. I would say that if it isn't a risky delivery, let's say it's a sprint early on where the team is still gelling, they don't, they're not really working at full skill level that we expect them to be at. They still need to go through some failures. I'm all for letting the team fail, right? Because if a developer is saying I'm working on it more than 2 daily meetings in a row, that's a big red flag for me, because that means that there's no transparency to progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if it's early on, I might want to let them just go on with it and then realize that they didn't deliver. But if it's later on and other team members are expecting this story to be completed in order for them to complete their stories, I would raise that as a red flag, and I would really say, even within the daily, I'm really worried that we've been discussing this story for more than 2 days, and we still don't know if we are getting closer to delivery or not. As a team, what would we like to do about this? Because that part is also important, right? Because I don't want to personalize the responsibility. It is the whole team's responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I want to teach them to feel that it's the whole team's responsibility as well, right? Like it's not just one developer. So I'm of two minds. When you look back at that story, Stella, and based on what you know now that you didn't know then, what do you think you would have done differently with the knowledge and skills you have today?
I think what I probably would have done differently is not wait till the last minute um, to ask what was going on. And I think what more context to that story was the story had moved forward and then was sent back by QA. And so perhaps I probably would have figured out exactly if that person needed support earlier on. And then walk through that. And then to your point as well, perhaps just asked, what can we do as a team? Do you need support? Because again, you have to, while sometimes things are being said ideally, you have to think about realistically. Because when someone says they don't need help, you cannot force help down their truth.
And that's why we should never ask only one person, right? Like that's a very good point. And I'm totally in agreement with you. And I totally feel the same pressure when I think of a situation like that the developer told you they felt, right? Because, you're asking me, so that means you're expecting me to know, right? So I think that there's also power in us as Scrum Masters to really embracing the concept of the team is delivering. We are helping the team grow as a team, and as they grow as a team, they deliver better software, more reliably, higher quality, and quickly, right? Like that's a very important aspect, because the speed of the feedback cycle is what brings the transparency we need in order to adapt, right? So what do you think, like, about how would you, like, let's say, imagine you're going to face a situation like that, in the next sprint with one of the teams you're working with, and they are feeling the same pressure and still, doing the same thing of saying, oh yeah, I'm working on it. How do you think we should act in that situation now?
Okay, so let's level set. So we have someone who's working on a story, and we're about 2 days to the end of the sprint, and they're still working on it. And the story is still in the same spot. Yeah, probably some one-on-one to figure out what's going on. Either I'm having the one-on-one with them. Again, there's a lot of context here. So if I'm in an environment, if there's someone within the team that I know that they either have maybe a closer relationship with, again, I could suggest that. Can you pair with this person to figure out what's going on? I don't want to keep asking the question because you are seeing what's going on during our dailies, right? Or if I'm the one, okay, I can schedule a one-on-one, like a 15 minutes coffee chat, like, hey, what's going on? Is there a way I can support you? This story is stuck. Or I can use my dailies to really figure out what the root cause is. Like, all right, so yesterday you said you're working on this and we're still in the same spot. Did anything change? Like, what changed between 24 hours from yesterday to today, right? And did you learn anything new? So I probably would change my approach depending on what is going on in that context. So either ask more detailed questions to get the real why, but ensuring that I'm not derailing the dailies too. Figure out if there's someone within the team that maybe they have a good relationship with, and they can work with them, support them, and then, of course, again, we can even leverage our refinement calls. We can leverage one of our existing calls to say, let's go over the stories that we're working on now. What do we think is in danger or at risk of not being completed at the end of the sprint? And let's talk about the why behind that. So I'll probably just change the way I'm asking the same question without them knowing that I'm asking the same question.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. That's a great tip. Thank you for sharing this story with us, Stella.
Sure. My pleasure.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.